I'm Kataras and we're at Restaurant Vanderveen, and today we're going to cook a dish based on celeriac. We're going to bake the celeriac in a salt crust, which is looking like that after it's been cut open and we remove the celeriac from here. So basically this is a salt crust made out of flour, rock salt and egg whites, and what makes it a little bit more special is that we use ashes leftover from the barbecue that we're using daily, and a little bit of hay. That gives a little bit of smokiness and earthy woody notes to the celeriac itself. We're going to pair the celeriac with thinly sliced pears, also very nice and in the season, and aged cheese called Remeker, the old one, which is 13 months old. We'll make a sauce out of it that will finish with a little bit of chamomile. Before we start making the dough for the celeriac, we'll need to make a little bit of brown butter. Brown butter is a caramelized butter, or they also in French called beurre noisette. That means that milk solids are caramelized with the help of the heat. So in a little pan, we'll heat up the butter till it starts to get a brown, golden brown color, let's say as a hazelnut, and with the help of that we'll brush the celeriac to add some extra flavor in there. We can do something else at the same time. We'll prepare the cheese sauce. We'll grate the cheese. In this case, Remeker cheese, you can also eat the rind, so we'll use it. And simply we'll grate it and we'll melt and infuse with water for at least simmering for at least 1-2 hours. It's important to simmer it and not boil it, so it will not burn and stick on the bottom of the pan. It's useful if we stir every here and then the end product, it will be a full flavor, cheese flavor infused water. So we will almost leave the cheese solids with no flavor. So we're going to use only the water and we'll discard the cheese itself. After we grate the cheese, we're going to add this in a pan, and we'll use a ratio of 1 to 1.5. For example, for 100 grams of cheese, we'll add 150 grams of water. And then we're going to simmer for, I would say, about 2 to 2.5 hours. So let me finish the brown butter. Brown butter, you should stop just before the butter starts to burn. If you're going to do it precisely, you should use a thermometer, and it's in between 140 to 165. Or then simply you can stir and stop it where it's light to medium brown color and smells, literally smells like a hazelnut. What we're going to do now, we'll make the salt crust. Basic recipe, it will be enough, I think, to bake 2 celeriacs. Is a kilo of flour, then 150 grams of rock salt, then I have 150 grams of egg whites, then I have, I would say, about 150 to 200 grams of ashes from the barbecue, and then I have a little bit of extra water that I will add while I'm mixing, depending on the flour and the consistency that I'll need to have in the dough. So add a little bit of water. I'm trying to achieve a dough that is firm but easy to roll out. So not too wet, but also not too hard. This is how the dough should look like. So it's easy to put together, but not too wet and also not too dry. So make my life easy to roll it out. So then I leave the dough to rest for half an hour or so. Don't put that in the fridge, otherwise it will be too hard and difficult to roll. Just leave it on the room temperature for a couple of minutes or an hour or so while you're prepping the rest, the celeriac, and then it should be fine. We're going to prep the celeriac. We simply going to trim off the edges. Usually I'm washing off the trimmings and I use them for preparations of stocks. The same with the leaves. I trim it off a little bit with a knife, and with the help of the peeler I'm going to peel off the skin of the celeriac. After I have peel off the celeriac, I'm going to use the brown butter that we made before and simply brush the celeriac with that. And then what I'm going to do is blowtorch the celeriac all around. So I'll add another layer of toasty caramelized butter to the celeriac before I seal with a salt crust and bake. If you don't have a blowtorch, you can just skip this, but the brown butter is almost essential to do. So this is how the celeriac looks like after I blowtorch all around and brush with brown butter. And now it's ready to be wrapped with a salt crust. Here we have pears. I don't want super soft pears because I will slice them very thin. So if you have a very soft pear and you slice it very thin, most likely it's going to be mushy and difficult to handle. So they're quite firm but ripe. I'm going to peel the pears. Then we'll slice them in half. Then again in half, so quarters. And then we'll take the core out. We'll also blowtorch the pears. It will add another flavor, another smoky and toasty flavor to the pears and to the whole dish at the end. But in this case, I believe because the pears, they have a lot of sugar, so it gives a little bit of caramelized sugar, almost toasty caramelized pear flavor to the dish, which is very nice. Because we're going to thinly slice and place on the top of the celeriac the pears, also gives a little contrast between the layers of the pears. It's nice to see the layers separating with burnt outsides. And this is how the pears they look like after I blowtorch them all around. We'll slice up with the help of the mandolin the pears. You can also slice them by hand very, very thin. This is the thickness that it will work the best. Of course, all depends how soft and ripe the pears are. And what we're going to do is place the pears on a parchment paper, like let's say overlap, almost like fish scales. This is classic, but it does works well with all the thin slices of different fruits and vegetables. With no brown edges, it will look a little bit pale. But also the browning, the blow torching of the pears, it gives a nice caramelized pear flavor. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to brush with a little bit of vinegar. I have here apple cider vinegar. The best idea is to use pear vinegar, and also a good idea is to use very good quality apple cider vinegar. I'm going to brush slightly the pears, so add a nice pickled sour flavor to the dish, because it's going to be very rich with roasted celeriac and cheese, so we'll need a little bit of acidity in there. And also it will help the pears to soften up a little bit more. So that's why it's important not to choose very soft pears and not to slice them too thin. So I have here my dough that is been rested for half an hour or so, we're going to roll out the dough. So I'll get about half. And then with the help of a parchment paper, I'll first press down the dough, and then I simply roll that out with a rolling pin. So I will say we need the dough to be on 1 centimeter thick or so. So now I have both of the sheets that I need for a celeriac open up and done. I'm going to place a little bit of hay on the bottom, and then I'll add the celeriac on the top, a little bit extra brown butter, a little bit more hay on the top, and just going and closing the celeriac with another sheet of dough. And this is how the celeriac it looks like just before it goes in the oven. I make sure that there is not extra air in between. Make sure it's sealed properly and there is no walls, because what we want is roast and steam at the same time. So I think we're good to go in the oven. I'm going to add in the oven that is on 180 degrees. It will take about 1.5 hours approximately. But the best way to cook the celeriac is to take the internal temperature. So the internal temperature, it has to be at least 91 degrees and not above 97. Make sure you hit the center, so probe it in the center to see the internal temperature. Okay, so now I have boiled my cheese sauce for about 1 hour and 45 minutes, and it's almost ready. You can of course simmer it for even longer to make sure that you extract all the flavor from the cheese. So you're ending up with a cheese water that is very strong and packs all the cheese flavor. This you should do only on the last 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to add a chamomile. So I don't have a standard recipe. I'm just going to infuse 300 to 400 milliliters of a sauce with a tablespoon of chamomile, maybe a tablespoon and a half, and then infuse that for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to strain off with the help of a sieve or a sinua, or even if you have a cheesecloth, even better. Make sure you press the chamomile. I'm going to thicken up the cheese sauce with cold butter. So make sure the sauce is very hot, and then you add cubes or pieces of cold butter. You simply just whisk them in. So now we have the celeriac out of the oven. I left it to cool down slightly, and now with the help of a scissors, or you can cut it with a serrated knife, I can cut open the salt crust. Alright, so this is the celeriac. This is the salt crust after it's been in the oven for almost 2 hours. I'll make sure I remove the excess and all the hay that is been stick to the celeriac. We'll portion the celeriac. I trim off a little bit the edges, and then I portion the celeriac, I would say in about 2 centimeters thick. We're in a tasting menu restaurant, so the portions are very, very small. Then I will cut with the help of ring cutter the edges. Usually the edges, they tiny bit too salty, so that's good that we trim off a little bit the edges. This is 2 portions. I'm just going to slice right in the middle. Then I'm going to do exactly the same with the pears. I'm just gonna run through with a ring cutter, cut carefully. And then cut again in half. Then with the help of a spatula, I will carefully lift the pear slices. So now we're going to plate up the celeriac. For last time, I will brush the celeriac with a little bit of brown butter on the top to help the pears stick with the celeriac. This dish doesn't need any extra salt because of course the celeriac is baked on a salt crust, and also the cheese sauce will have the saltiness. Then I'm going again to slightly brush with a little bit of vinegar the pear slices, so they're nice, a little bit acidic and shiny. Then add a little onion flour in there, and at the end we'll finish with a Remeker sauce.
Lust je nog een video? Dat treft, want er staan er meer dan 1400 voor je klaar. Abonneer je op het YouTube kanaal of schrijf je in voor de nieuwsbrief, dan hou ik je wekelijks op de hoogte van nieuw materiaal.